Before we dive into this chilling account, make sure to leave a like and let us know where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. The cold in Alaska isn't like cold anywhere else. It's the kind that seeps through your bones, settles in your marrow, and makes you forget what warmth ever felt like. In March of 1976, I learned that lesson the hard way. My name is Lieutenant Marcus Webb, and I was part of a 6-man Navy diving team stationed at the Adak Naval Air Facility in the Aleutian Islands. What we found in those frozen waters, well, some things aren't meant to be disturbed. Our mission was routine, at least that's what Commander Hayes told us during the briefing. The Navy had lost contact with an underwater sensor array positioned near the continental shelf, about 40 miles northwest of our base. These sensors were part of the Cold War surveillance network, designed to detect Soviet submarine activity in the Bering Sea. When 3 weeks passed without a single transmission, headquarters decided it was time to send us down to investigate. I remember that morning with crystalline clarity. The sky was the color of old bruises, purple and gray, threatening snow that wouldn't come for another few hours. Our breath formed thick clouds in the air as we loaded equipment onto the USS Petrel, a salvage vessel that would serve as our floating base for the operation. The ship's hull creaked and groaned as it cut through the partially frozen waters, a sound that reminded me of something alive and suffering. My team consisted of 5 other men, each one handpicked for their expertise. There was Chief Petty Officer Raymond Ray Kowalski, our team leader, a bull of a man with 20 years of diving experience and a scar across his jaw from a propeller accident in Vietnam. Ray didn't talk much, but when he did, everyone listened. Then there was Petty Officer First Class David Chun, our technical specialist, who could fix anything electronic with a screwdriver and sheer determination. Chun had a nervous habit of clicking his tongue when he was concentrating, a sound that would later haunt my dreams. Petty Officer Second Class James Jimmy Dawson was our youngest member, only 23, with blonde hair that was always too long for regulation and a smile that could charm anyone. He joked that he joined the Navy to see the world. Nobody told him he'd be spending most of his time underwater in near-freezing temperatures. Then there was Hospital Corpsman Marcus Doc Williams, who'd patched up more diverse than he could count and had a flask of whiskey hidden in his medical kit that he thought nobody knew about. And finally, there was Petty Officer Third Class Anthony Russo, a transfer from the East Coast who'd never experienced Alaska's particular brand of cold before. Russo had dark circles under his eyes that morning. He'd mentioned having nightmares the past few nights, though he wouldn't say about what. The locals at Adak had warned us before we left. There was a small Aleut community near the base, descendants of the island's original inhabitants, and they had their own relationship with these waters. An old fisherman named Samuel Ayugadak approached us on the dock as we were loading the last of our gear. His face was weathered like driftwood, carved by decades of harsh winds and sea spray. "You going out to the deep shelf?" he asked, his English accented but clear. Ray nodded. "Just a salvage operation. We'll be back before dark." Samuel's expression darkened. He looked at each of us in turn, his eyes lingering on me for a moment that felt far too long. "My grandfather told me stories about that place. Said there are things in the deep trenches that have been sleeping since before the Ice Age. Things that should stay sleeping." Jimmy laughed, trying to lighten the mood. "Come on, old-timer. You trying to spook us with sea monsters?" But Samuel didn't smile. "Not monsters. Survivors. Things that found ways to live in places nothing else could. The cold preserves, you understand? Keeps things intact. Waiting." He pulled something from his pocket. A carved piece of bone, yellowed with age, with symbols I didn't recognize etched into its surface. "My grandfather gave this to his diving partner once. Man came back up screaming about teeth in the ice. Teeth bigger than him. This amulet was all that kept him sane enough to make it to the surface." He tried to hand it to Ray, but our chief waved it away. "Appreciate the concern, but we've got the Navy's best equipment and training. We'll be fine." Samuel pocketed the amulet slowly, his expression grave. "The Navy didn't train you for what lives in the old ice. Some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. Some doors aren't meant to be opened." He turned to walk away, then paused. If you see something down there, something that doesn't make sense, don't try to understand it. Just get back to the surface. Fast. We watched him shuffle away, his warning hanging in the air like our frozen breath. Russo shifted uncomfortably beside me. What do you think he meant by that? Superstition, Chen said, checking the regulators on our diving equipment. These remote communities, they develop their own folklore. It's natural, but Doc Williams wasn't so sure. I've been stationed here for 2 years. The Aleut people, they don't scare easily, and they know these waters better than any of us. Maybe we should pay attention. Ray cut through the discussion with his command voice. We have a mission. Sensor array needs investigating. That's what we're going to do. Now everyone finish the equipment check and get ready to ship out. The Petrel left dock at 0600 hours. The journey to the dive site took 4 hours. 4 hours of increasingly rough seas and dropping temperatures. Ice floes dotted the water like broken pieces of a mirror, reflecting the weak sunlight that barely penetrated the thick cloud cover. The ship's navigator, a grizzled warrant officer named Patterson, kept muttering about unusual currents in the area, about how his instruments were giving readings that didn't match the charts. It's like the water temperature is all wrong, he said, showing Ray a printout covered in numbers that meant nothing to me. We're getting pockets of water down there that are registering near freezing, cold enough that nothing should be able to survive. But at the same time, there are warm currents mixing in from somewhere. The thermal layers are all confused, like something's disrupting the normal flow. Could be volcanic activity, Chin suggested. These islands are all volcanic in origin. Patterson shook his head. No seismic activity reported in months. And these readings, they're moving, shifting, almost like... He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Like what? I asked. He glanced at Ray, then back at his instruments. Like something's circulating the water. Something big. By the time we reached the dive coordinates, the sky had darkened to the color of slate. Snow had begun to fall in thick, heavy flakes that dissolved instantly when they hit the ocean's surface. The Petrel's crew secured us in position using a 4-point anchor system. They weren't taking any chances with the currents. Our dive plan was straightforward. Descend to 200 feet where the sensor array was positioned, assess the damage, attempt repairs if possible, or document the problem for a follow-up mission. We'd be using surface-supplied diving equipment rather than standard scuba. Umbilical hoses would provide us with air, power, and communication with the surface. It was safer for extended deep dives in cold water, though the hoses could be a liability if anything went wrong. As we suited up in our dry suits and checked each other's equipment, I felt the first real tendril of unease curl in my stomach. Maybe it was Samuel's warning. Maybe it was the strange look in Patterson's eyes when he talked about the water temperatures. Or maybe it was something more primal, some ancient part of my brain that recognized we were about to enter a realm where humans were never meant to go. Ray noticed my hesitation. You good, Webb? I nodded, securing my helmet. Yeah, Chief. Just feels off today. It's the cold, he said, though his eyes suggested he felt it too. Plays tricks on your mind. Stay focused on the mission. We entered the water in pairs, Ray and Chen first, then Jimmy and me with Doc and Russo as our safety backup on the surface. The cold hit me even through the dry suit, a shocking embrace that made my chest tighten. The water was murky, filled with particles of organic matter and ice crystals that caught the light from our helmet lamps like tiny stars. As we descended along the anchor line, the world above faded away. The weak daylight filtering through the surface disappeared within the first 50 feet, replaced by a darkness so complete it felt solid. Our helmet lamps carved narrow tunnels of visibility through the gloom, revealing nothing but more darkness beyond. At 100 feet, I began to hear it, a sound that didn't belong. Low and resonant, almost below the threshold of hearing, it vibrated through the water and into my bones. I keyed my communication line. Anyone else hearing that? Hearing what? Chen's voice crackled in my helmet speaker. That humming, like machinery, but deeper. Ray's voice cut in. Probably cavitation from the currents hitting the shelf. Keep descending. But I knew what cavitation sounded like, and this wasn't it. This was something else. Something that made my teeth ache and my skin prickle with primitive fear. At 150 feet, the thermocline hit us, that boundary where warm water meets cold. But instead of a gradual transition, it was like passing through a curtain. One moment, the water was merely cold. The next, it was agonizingly frigid, cold enough that I could feel it through my dry suit, through my undergarments, trying to reach my skin. And that's when Jimmy's light caught something in the darkness ahead. "Jesus Christ," he whispered over the comms. "What the hell is that?" I turned my helmet lamp to follow his beam, and my breath caught in my throat. There, suspended in the water like a photograph frozen in time, was a mass of ice. Not a regular iceberg, this was different. It was perfectly clear, like glass, and inside it was a shape. Something massive. Something that shouldn't exist. "Ray," I managed to say, my voice barely steady. "You need to see this." Ray's light joined ours, illuminating more of the massive ice formation. It hung there in the water column like a colossal crystal chandelier, roughly 40 feet across and extending down into the darkness below us. The ice was ancient, you could tell by its clarity, by the way it seemed to glow from within when our lights hit it. Modern ice, recent ice, is cloudy with trapped air bubbles. This was something else entirely. This was ice from a time when the world was different. "That's glacial ice," Chun said, his voice tight with something between awe and fear. "But what's it doing suspended in open water? It should either float to the surface or sink to the bottom." "Look at the cables," Ray said, directing his light downward. He was right. Thick steel cables, heavily corroded but still intact, ran from the ice mass down into the darkness. They were attached to the ice with what looked like old drilling equipment, industrial anchors that had been deliberately placed. "Someone put this here," I said, the realization sending a chill through me that had nothing to do with the water temperature. "This isn't natural." Jimmy maneuvered closer, his light playing across the surface of the ice. "But why? Why would anyone anchor a chunk of glacial ice underwater?" That's when we saw it clearly, the shape inside the ice. At first, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. It looked like a fish, but the proportions were all wrong. The head alone was at least 6 feet across, maybe more. The mouth was partially open, revealing rows upon rows of triangular teeth, each one the size of my hand. The teeth were serrated, designed for one purpose: tearing through flesh and bone with maximum efficiency. "Holy Mother of God," Ray breathed. "Is that?" "It can't be," Chen interrupted. "It's impossible. They've been extinct for millions of years." But there it was, suspended in its icy prison, a Carcharodon Megalodon. A prehistoric shark that had ruled Earth's oceans during the Miocene epoch, a creature that could grow up to 60 feet in length and had jaws powerful enough to crush a whale's skull. Every child who'd ever opened a book about prehistoric life knew about megalodons. And every scientist on Earth believed they'd been extinct for at least 2.6 million years. Except here one was, frozen in time, preserved in ice so clear we could see every detail of its massive form. The skin was dark gray, almost black, and covered in scarring, evidence of a long, violent life. One of its pectoral fins was visible, spanning at least 8 feet. The eye, clouded over but still intact, was the size of a dinner plate. "We need to report this," I said, reaching for my comm line. "Command needs to know about this immediately." But Ray grabbed my arm, stopping me. "Wait, think about what you're saying, Webb. We report this, and what happens? Scientists descend on this location like locusts. The Navy seals off the entire area. This becomes the find of the century, hell, the find of all time. But right now, we have a mission. We need to find that sensor array." "Chief, with all due respect, this is bigger than some sensor array," Jimmy said. This is a dead shark frozen in ice." Ray cut him off. "An incredible discovery, yes, but still dead. Our mission parameters haven't changed. We document this, we complete our primary objective, then we report everything." "Understood." I wanted to argue, but Ray was right about one thing: the moment we reported this, everything would change. And we still needed to find out what had happened to the sensor array. Understood, Chief. Chun had already pulled out an underwater camera and was taking photographs, the flash creating brief, stark illuminations of the creature in its frozen tomb. Each flash revealed new details: the massive gill slits, the powerful tail fin, the sheer impossible size of the animal. In those brief moments of bright light, I could almost imagine I saw something else, the faint suggestion of movement, as if the creature were breathing. But that was impossible. It had to be a trick of the light, of the swirling particles in the water. How long do you think it's been down here? Jimmy asked, unable to tear his gaze away from the massive shark. The ice looks like it came from the last ice age, Chun said, still taking pictures. So maybe 12,000 years, give or take. But those cables and anchors, they're modern. Maybe 50 years old, judging by the corrosion pattern. So someone found this thing and deliberately anchored it down here, I said. The question is why? Why not bring it to the surface? Why hide it? Ray checked his dive computer. Questions for later. We've been at 200 feet for 8 minutes already. We need to find that sensor array and start our ascent before we run into decompression problems. He was right. At this depth, we were limited in bottom time. The longer we stayed down, the longer we'd need to spend decompressing on the way up to avoid getting the bends. We continued our descent, following the anchor line and keeping the massive ice formation in sight. At 220 feet, we found the sensor array, or what was left of it. The metal frame that should have held the sophisticated listening equipment was twisted and torn, as if something incredibly powerful had grabbed it and tried to rip it apart. Cables dangled uselessly in the current, their ends frayed and corroded. The sensors themselves were completely gone. What could do this? Jimmy asked, running his gloved hand along a bent support beam. This is 3-inch steel. You'd need industrial equipment to cause this kind of damage. Chun examined the torn metal with his light. Look at these marks. These aren't tool marks or stress fractures. These look like impact damage, like something hit it repeatedly with tremendous force. I moved closer to inspect the markings myself, and that's when I felt it. A current, but not like any current I'd experienced before. It was rhythmic, pulsing, as if something large was moving water back and forth, pushing and pulling, like breathing. You guys feel that? I asked, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Feel what? Ray responded. The current. It's pulsing. Jimmy's light swung around, illuminating the darkness in all directions. I feel it too. It's coming from below us. We all instinctively looked down, our helmet lamps creating cones of light that extended maybe 20 feet before being swallowed by the absolute darkness of the deep water. The pulsing current grew stronger, more pronounced. And then, from somewhere in that darkness below, came a sound. It was the same low humming I'd heard earlier, but closer now, louder. It resonated through my chest, made my teeth ache, vibrated in my bones. And underneath it, barely audible, was something else. A rhythmic percussion that I recognized with a jolt of primal fear. A heartbeat. Chief, I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to control it. I think we need to ascend, right now. Webb's right, Chun added, his earlier scientific curiosity replaced by naked fear. Something's wrong here. This whole situation is wrong. Ray was about to respond when Jimmy's voice cracked over the comms, high-pitched and terrified. The ice! Look at the ice! We all turned our lights back toward the massive ice formation. At first, I didn't see what had spooked Jimmy. Then Chen's light caught it, and my blood turned to ice water in my veins. There were cracks, hairline fractures spreading across the surface of the ancient ice like a spider's web. And they were growing, expanding even as we watched. The ice that had held that prehistoric monster for thousands of years was breaking apart. That's not possible, Chen whispered. That ice is colder than the surrounding water. It shouldn't be melting. But it wasn't melting, it was shattering. From the inside, another pulse of current hit us, stronger this time, and I saw the massive shark's tail fin twitch. Just a slight movement, but enough to send chunks of ice splintering away from the main mass. The heartbeat sound grew louder, faster. Oh God, Jimmy said. Oh God, it's alive. That thing is alive. Everyone calm down, Ray ordered, but I could hear the strain in his voice. We're ascending. Now, stay together and follow the anchor line. Don't look down. Don't look at the ice. Just focus on getting to the surface. We began our ascent, but the pulsing currents made it difficult to maintain control. My dry suit felt constricting, suffocating, even though I knew logically that my air supply was fine. Every few seconds, I couldn't help but glance back down at the ice formation, watching as more cracks spread across its surface. At 180 feet, a sound echoed through the water that made every instinct in my body scream to swim faster. Surface protocol be damned. It was a crack. Not like breaking ice, but like breaking bone. Deep and resonant and final. Don't look back, Ray shouted. Keep ascending. But I did look back. We all did. The ice formation had split in half. Massive chunks of ancient ice were falling away, tumbling into the darkness below. And there, in the center of that frozen prison, illuminated by our helmet lamps, was the Megalodon. Its eye was no longer clouded. It was clear, dark, and fixed directly on us. The creature that had been frozen for thousands of years, that should have been dead for millions, was staring at us with unmistakable intelligence. Its gills flexed, forcing frigid water through them in a test of long-dormant muscles. The massive jaw opened wider, revealing row after row of serrated teeth that gleamed in our lights. And then it moved. Not quickly. Its movements were sluggish, uncertain, like something waking from a very long sleep. The tail swayed back and forth, slowly at first, then with increasing confidence. Chunks of ice still clung to its massive body, falling away in clouds of frozen debris. Faster, Ray commanded. Everyone ascend faster, but we couldn't, not without risking the bends. At this depth, ascending too quickly would cause nitrogen bubbles to form in our blood, potentially killing us or leaving us crippled for life. We were trapped between two impossible choices: ascend slowly and methodically, following proper decompression stops, or surface quickly and die from nitrogen narcosis. Below us, the Megalodon completed its awakening. With one powerful thrust of its tail, it tore free from the remaining ice and began to circle in the darkness. We couldn't see all of it. The creature was too large, our lights too limited, but we caught glimpses. A section of scarred flank here, the tip of a pectoral fin there, the curve of its massive tail disappearing into the murk. It's circling us, Chun said, his voice barely controlled. Sharks circle when they're deciding whether to attack. It's been frozen for thousands of years, Jimmy said, almost hysterical. It should be dead. It should be. His words cut off as something brushed against his umbilical line, tugging it hard enough to jerk him sideways in the water. Through my helmet, I could hear him screaming. Something grabbed my line. Something's pulling me down. Ray immediately grabbed Jimmy's harness, fighting against whatever force was dragging our teammate toward the depths. I kicked over to help, my hands finding purchase on Jimmy's air hose, pulling with everything I had. Chun joined us, and together we managed to halt Jimmy's descent. Below us, just at the edge of our light's reach, I saw it. The Megalodon's head, jaws partially open, Jimmy's umbilical line caught in its teeth. The shark wasn't biting down, wasn't trying to sever the line. It was just holding it, testing it like a cat playing with a mouse. Then, as if satisfied with its examination, the creature opened its jaws and released the line. It sank back into the darkness, disappearing from view entirely. But I could still feel it down there, waiting, watching, deciding. We need to surface. Doc Williams' voice crackled over the comms from the petrel above us. We're reading some kind of massive sonar contact under your position. What's going on down there? We've got a situation, Ray said, his voice remarkably steady considering the circumstances. Maintaining controlled ascent. Prepare the decompression chamber and alert medical. We might have injuries. Copy that. Is anyone hurt? I looked at Jimmy, who was trembling in his suit, his breathing rapid and shallow over the comms. Chun looked pale even through his helmet faceplate. Ray's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. And me? I couldn't stop my hands from shaking, couldn't slow my racing heart. "Not yet," Ray said, "but we're not clear of danger." We continued our ascent, painfully slow, stopping at predetermined depths to allow nitrogen to safely leave our bloodstreams. Each stop felt like an eternity. Below us, I could occasionally see a shadow moving in the darkness. Massive, predatory, patient. The Megalodon was following us, maintaining its distance, but definitely following. At 100 feet, during our 3-minute decompression stop, Chen's voice came over the comms, quiet and thoughtful despite the terror of our situation. "I've been thinking about those cables, about why someone would anchor that ice here deliberately." "Not the time, Chen," Ray said. "No, listen. What if this wasn't a discovery? What if it was containment? What if someone knew that thing was alive in there, knew it could potentially wake up, and anchored it here specifically to keep it away from shipping lanes, away from populated areas?" The implication hung in the water between us, colder than the surrounding ocean. If Chun was right, then someone, possibly the military, possibly some scientific organization, had known about this creature for decades, had known it was alive, and had made the conscious decision to hide it in the depths rather than destroy it or study it properly. "If that's true," Jimmy said, "then we just released it. We came down here and our presence, our lights, our noise, we woke it up." "We didn't know," I said, but the words felt hollow even to me. "Doesn't matter," Ray cut in. "What matters is getting to the surface and reporting this. Command can decide what to do about it." At 50 feet, we made our final decompression stop. The sunlight filtering down from above seemed impossibly far away, impossibly bright after the absolute darkness of the deep. I could see the hull of the Petrel, a dark shape against the lighter surface water, and I wanted nothing more than to breach that surface, to breathe air that hadn't been compressed and bottled, to be out of this alien world where dead things could come back to life. That's when the Megalodon made its move. It came from below, rising from the darkness like a nightmare given physical form. One moment there was nothing but murky water beneath us. The next, the Megalodon was there, its massive body cutting through the ocean with terrifying grace. At this depth, with the filtered sunlight creating better visibility, we could see the full horror of what we'd unleashed. The creature was easily 50 feet long, maybe more. Its body was covered in scars. Long, pale lines that crossed its dark gray skin like a roadmap of violence. Some of these scars looked ancient, healed over centuries or millennia. Others looked fresher, if anything on a frozen prehistoric shark could be called fresh. The dorsal fin alone was taller than I was, cutting through the water with mechanical precision. But it was the eyes that truly terrified me. They weren't the dead, black eyes of a normal shark. These were intelligent, calculating, filled with an awareness that spoke of a mind far more complex than anything that should exist in a fish. The Megalodon wasn't just hunting. It was thinking, strategizing, learning about these strange, soft creatures in their artificial skins. "Hold position," Ray commanded. "Don't make any sudden movements." But it was already too late. The Megalodon had targeted Russo. Doc had stayed on the surface with Russo as our safety divers, but when we'd called up about the situation, both of them had descended to the 50-foot mark to assist with our decompression stop. Now Russo hung in the water about 15 feet away from our group, his umbilical line stretching up toward the Petrel, and the Megalodon had positioned itself directly below him. "Russo, listen to me very carefully," Ray said, his voice forced into calmness. "Don't move. Don't kick. Don't do anything that might trigger a predatory response." But Russo was panicking. I could see it in the way his body trembled, in the rapid movements of his head as he tried to track the massive shark circling beneath him. His breathing over the comms was rapid, shallow, the sound of a man on the edge of hysteria. "It's right under me," Russo said, his voice breaking. "Oh God, it's right under me. I can see its mouth. I can see its teeth." "Everyone stay calm," Doc Williams said, though he sounded anything but calm himself. "Russo, I'm going to move toward you slowly. I've got a bang stick in my equipment belt. If that thing comes any closer, I'll use it." A bang stick, a powerhead device that delivered a shotgun shell on contact. Designed for shark defense. But against a creature this size, with skin that had survived millions of years of evolution to become nearly impenetrable armor, would it even make a difference? Doc began to move, using slow, controlled kicks to propel himself toward Russo. The Megalodon's eye tracked the movement. That massive head turned slightly, acknowledging Doc's approach but not reacting to it. The creature continued its circle, each revolution bringing it slightly closer to Russo. "It's testing us," Chun whispered over the comms, "watching how we react, learning our capabilities." "Sharks don't do that," Jimmy said. "Sharks are instinct-driven. They don't—" "This isn't a normal shark," I interrupted. "Look at it. Really look at it. That's not instinctive behavior. That's intelligence." As if to prove my point, the Megalodon suddenly changed direction. Instead of continuing its circle beneath Russo, it dove deeper, disappearing from view. For a moment, we all hung there in the water, our helmet lamps sweeping the darkness below, searching for any sign of the massive predator. "Where did it go?" Russo asked, his voice pitched high with fear. "Everyone watch your sectors," Ray ordered. "It could come from any direction." The water around us was eerily still. Even the normal current seemed to have stopped, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. Above us, I could see the dark hull of the Petrel, so close and yet impossibly far. We needed just a few more minutes at this depth, just enough time for the nitrogen to safely leave our systems, and then we could surface. Those minutes felt like hours. "Movement!" Chin suddenly shouted. 3 o'clock, coming fast. The Megalodon erupted from the darkness to our right, but not at Russo, at Doc Williams. The creature had waited until our attention was divided, until our guard was down, and then struck at the one who'd shown aggression by reaching for the bang stick. Doc didn't even have time to scream. The massive jaws opened, revealing row upon row of serrated teeth, each one designed by millions of years of evolution to do one thing perfectly: kill. The shark hit Doc like a freight train, its mouth closing around his torso with a sound I'll never forget. A wet crunch that traveled through the water and into my bones. Blood exploded into the water, dark and thick. Doc's umbilical line went taut, then snapped. His screaming came through the comms for maybe 3 seconds, a sound of pure agony, and then cut off abruptly as the Megalodon shook its massive head back and forth, the motion that great white sharks use to tear chunks of flesh from their prey. "No!" Russo screamed. "Doc, no!" The Megalodon released what was left of Doc Williams. His body tumbled through the water, trailing blood and torn pieces of his dry suit. The shark backed away, its movements almost leisurely, and I realized with horror what had just happened. It had taken a test bite. Great white sharks often bite once and retreat, testing whether their prey is worth the effort to kill and consume. They used that first bite to assess the energy content of their potential meal. The Megalodon had just done the same thing, but with the intelligence to know that we were in a group, that there were more of us to hunt. "Surface! Everyone surface now!" Ray shouted, all decompression protocols abandoned in the face of immediate death. "Emergency ascent! Go!" We kicked toward the surface as hard as we could. Behind us, the Megalodon had returned to Doc's body, and I forced myself not to look, not to watch as the creature began to feed. The water around us was filled with blood now, clouding our vision, turning the world into a red nightmare. My chest burned as we ascended. Too fast, way too fast, but staying at depth meant certain death. The bends would be bad, nitrogen bubbles forming in our blood, potentially causing paralysis or death, but at least it gave us a chance. Better than being torn apart by a prehistoric monster. Russo was lagging behind. The panic had sapped his strength, and his kicks were weak, uncoordinated. Jimmy dropped back to help him, grabbing Russo's harness and adding his strength to get our teammate moving faster. That's when I saw the shadow below us. Massive, dark, moving with terrible purpose. The Megalodon had finished with Doc and was coming for the rest of us. "It's coming!" I shouted. "It's right below us!" Ray pulled something from his belt, a flare, the kind we carried for emergency signaling. He yanked the ignition tab and thrust it behind us, toward the approaching shadow. The flare ignited in a burst of brilliant magnesium light, impossibly bright in the dim water. The Megalodon veered away, its prehistoric eyes not adapted for such intense illumination. But we all knew it was a temporary reprieve. We had maybe seconds before the creature adjusted and renewed its attack. We broke the surface in a spray of water and blood, our hands immediately grabbing for the dive ladder on the petrol side. The deck crew was shouting, moving into action, but their voices seemed distant, muffled. My ears were ringing, my body already starting to feel the effects of the too rapid ascent. "Get them aboard!" Commander Hayes was shouting from the deck above. "Someone get the decompression chamber ready. Where's Williams?" Ray pulled himself onto the ladder, then reached down to help pull me up. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the rungs. Behind me, Jimmy and Russo were struggling to reach the ladder, their movements slowed by exhaustion and shock. "Doc's gone," Ray said flatly as sailors helped pull him onto the deck. "Killed by... He couldn't finish the sentence. How do you explain what we just witnessed? How do you tell a ship full of professional Navy sailors that a creature extinct for millions of years had just torn apart one of their teammates? I hauled myself onto the deck, my legs barely supporting my weight. My helmet was filling with the sound of my own ragged breathing, and I fumbled with the latches, desperate to get it off, to breathe real air, to be free of the suffocating confinement. Strong hands helped me, and suddenly the helmet was gone. Cold air hit my face, and I gasped, gulping it down like a drowning man. Commander Hayes was there, his face grave, trying to ask me questions, but I couldn't focus on his words. "In the water," I managed to say. "Still in the water." Jimmy and Russo. We turned to look at the dive ladder. Jimmy had reached it and was climbing up, but Russo was still in the water, his hands grasping for the bottom rung. He was maybe 3 feet from safety, 3 feet from survival. "Come on, Russo," Jimmy shouted down at him. "You're almost there. Just grab the ladder." Russo reached up, his gloved fingers inches from the metal rung. And that's when the water behind him exploded. The Megalodon breached the surface like a torpedo, its massive jaws already open. We watched in frozen horror as thousands of pounds of prehistoric predator launched itself partially out of the water. Russo didn't even have time to scream. The jaws closed around his legs, and he was yanked backward, disappearing beneath the surface in a spray of red. "Russo!" Jimmy screamed, starting to climb back down the ladder. Ray grabbed him, pulling him forcibly back onto the deck. "He's gone. There's nothing you can do." Jimmy fought against Ray's grip, still screaming Russo's name, but we all knew the truth. The water where Russo had been was now a churning mass of red. Pieces of his torn umbilical line floated to the surface. And then, for just a moment, we saw it clearly. The Megalodon's massive head breaking the surface, Russo's body limp in its jaws, before the creature dove back into the depths. The deck was chaos. Sailors were shouting, running for weapons, for harpoons, for anything that might be used against the creature. Commander Hayes was on the radio, his voice urgent as he reported the situation to Naval Command. Medical personnel rushed forward with stretchers, preparing for the worst. Jimmy collapsed onto the deck, his body racked with sobs. Chun sat with his back against the bulkhead, staring at nothing, his face the color of old paper. Ray stood at the rail, looking down at the blood-stained water, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. And I just stood there, dripping seawater and my teammates' blood, trying to process what had just happened. 2 men dead. 2 men torn apart by a creature that shouldn't exist, that had been safely entombed in ice until we disturbed it. A sailor approached Commander Hayes, holding out a long-range rifle. "Sir, should we try to shoot it if it surfaces again?" Hayes looked at the rifle, then at the water, then at what was left of his diving team. "What good would it do? You saw the size of that thing. A rifle round would be like a mosquito bite." "We have to do something, sir," the sailor insisted. "We can't just let it..." "Let it what?" Hayes interrupted. "Swim away? That's exactly what it's doing. It's going back to the deep water. back to wherever it lived before we woke it up. But I wasn't so sure. I walked to the rail, ignoring the protests from the medical officer who wanted to check me for decompression sickness. The water had calmed, the blood slowly dissipating in the currents. But something made me certain the Megalodon hadn't gone far. "It's still here," I said quietly. Ray joined me at the rail. "What makes you say that?" "Because it's smart. Smarter than any shark has a right to be. It knows we're the ones who freed it. And I think it's curious about us." As if to confirm my words, a massive shadow passed beneath the surface, maybe 30 feet down. The shadow of something so large it seemed impossible. Seemed like it had to be a trick of the light or the water. But we all saw the distinctive shape of that massive prehistoric body as it circled the petrel once, twice, 3 times. Then it dove deeper and disappeared from view. "Jesus Christ," Chun said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What have we done?" Commander Hayes approached us, his face grim. "All of you into the decompression chamber. Now, we need to make sure you survive the ascent, and then we need a full debriefing on everything that happened down there." As medical personnel led us toward the chamber, I looked back at the water one last time. The surface was calm now, peaceful even, with gentle swells rolling past the ship. You'd never know that just beneath that serene surface, something ancient and terrible had been awakened. Inside the decompression chamber, the 4 of us sat in silence. The chamber was cramped, designed for emergency use with barely enough room for us to sit without touching. The door sealed with a heavy clang, and we began the slow process of returning to normal atmospheric pressure. Jimmy hadn't stopped crying. Silent tears ran down his face as he stared at the chamber wall. Chun kept clicking his tongue, that nervous habit of his now constant, filling the small space with a sound that set my teeth on edge. Ray sat with his head in his hands, the weight of command evident in every line of his body. "I should have listened to the old man," I said finally. "Samuel. He warned us. He told us some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed." "We didn't know," Ray said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "How could we have known?" "The cables," Chin said. "The anchors. All the warning signs were there. Someone had gone to enormous effort to keep that thing contained, and we waltzed right in and woke it up. We were just doing our job," Jimmy said, his voice thick with grief and anger. "We were supposed to check on a sensor array. That's all. Just a routine dive. And now Doc and Russo are dead, torn apart by something that's been extinct for millions of years. How is that fair? How is any of this fair?" It wasn't fair, but fairness had nothing to do with it. We had entered a realm where we didn't belong, disturbed something that was meant to remain undisturbed, and paid the price for our arrogance. Humanity's greatest flaw has always been our belief that we have the right to go anywhere, do anything, take what we want from the world without consequence. The Megalodon was the consequence. Through the chamber's small porthole, I could see the deck of the petrel. Sailors were setting up some kind of sonar equipment, probably trying to track the creature's movements. Others were loading ammunition into weapons that I suspected would be utterly useless against a predator that size. Commander Hayes stood at the rail, binoculars raised, scanning the water. Looking for what? I wondered. Looking for the creature to surface so we could shoot at it uselessly? Looking for Russo's body to wash up so we could give him a proper burial? Or looking for some sign that this nightmare was over, that we could return to port and pretend none of this had ever happened? But this wasn't over. I could feel it in my bones, in the way my hands still shook, in the cold knot of dread that had settled in my stomach. The Megalodon was still out there, swimming in the dark waters beneath us. And now that it was free, now that it had tasted human blood, what would it do? "Sir," Chin said, addressing Ray, "what are we going to tell command? How do we report this?" Ray looked up, his eyes haunted. "We tell them the truth. We tell them what we saw, what happened to Doc and Russo. We tell them there's a living Megalodon in these waters." "They'll never believe us," Jimmy said. "They'll think we're crazy or lying or—" "We have the photos," Chin interrupted. "I took pictures of it in the ice, remember? Before it woke up. That's proof. Undeniable proof. But would it be enough?" I thought about how the conversation would go. We'd show them the photos, tell them our story, and they'd look at us like we'd lost our minds. They'd say it was a whale or a submarine or mass hallucination brought on by nitrogen narcosis. They'd find a rational explanation because the alternative was too terrifying to accept. Because accepting it meant accepting that we'd unleash something into the ocean that could hunt ships, that could attack coastal communities, that could change the entire balance of marine ecosystems. Accepting it meant accepting responsibility for the deaths that would surely follow. The decompression chamber's pressure gauge slowly wound down, marking our return to normal atmospheric conditions. Each minute felt like an hour. My joints ached, my head throbbed, and my lungs burned with every breath. But those physical pains were nothing compared to the psychological weight of what we'd witnessed, what we'd lost, what we'd unleashed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the chamber door unsealed. Medical personnel immediately swarmed us, checking vital signs, looking for signs of decompression sickness. I let them work, barely registering their questions, their tests, their concerned looks. Commander Hayes was waiting for us. My cabin. All of you. Now. We followed him through the ship's narrow corridors, sailors stepping aside to let us pass, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. Word had spread. Everyone on the Petrel knew that something terrible had happened, even if they didn't know the details yet. In the commander's cabin, Hayes shut the door firmly and gestured for us to sit. He poured 4 glasses of whiskey from a bottle in his desk drawer and handed them out without asking if we wanted them. We all drank. The alcohol burned going down, but it was a clean burn, a normal burn, so different from the cold terror that still gripped my insides. "Tell me everything," Hayes said. "From the beginning. Leave nothing out." So we did. Ray led the account, his voice steady and professional despite the horror of what he was describing. Chun provided technical details, the ice formation, the anchor system, the strange water temperatures. Jimmy described the creature's movements, its hunting behavior. And I filled in the gaps, the small observations that painted the full picture of what we'd encountered. When we finished, Hayes sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared at the wall behind us, processing what we told him. "I've already sent a preliminary report to Pacific Fleet Command," he finally said. "I reported that we lost 2 men to a shark attack during a routine dive. I didn't specify what kind of shark." "Sir, with all due respect," Ray began, but Hayes held up a hand. "I know what you're going to say, Chief, that we need to tell them the full truth. That there's a prehistoric creature loose in these waters and Command needs to know. And you're right. But consider this. What do you think will happen when we report that we found a living Megalodon?" The question hung in the air. I knew the answer, and I could see from their faces that the others did too. "They'll send more ships," Chen said quietly. "More divers, scientists, researchers. They'll want to capture it, study it, or kill it," Jimmy added bitterly. "Turn it into some trophy. Either way," Hayes said, "this area will be flooded with personnel, all of them at risk from that creature. And for what? So we can prove we found something that shouldn't exist? So we can add it to some museum somewhere? So we can warn people," I said. "That thing is loose in these waters now. Could attack shipping, fishing vessels, other divers. People have a right to know." Hayes nodded slowly. "You're right. They do, and I will report it, the full truth. But I wanted you all to understand what that means, what will follow. Your lives are about to change. You'll be questioned, debriefed, studied. Every decision you made down there will be analyzed. And some people won't believe you no matter what evidence we provide. They'll say you were hallucinating, or that you misidentified a whale shark, or that you're all suffering from shared psychosis." He was right, and we all knew it. But what choice did we have? We couldn't just stay silent, couldn't pretend this hadn't happened. Doc Williams and Anthony Russo deserved better than that. They deserved to have their deaths mean something, to serve as a warning to others. "Do what you need to do, sir," Ray said. "We'll cooperate fully with whatever investigation follows." Hayes stood, walked to his desk, and began typing on a secure terminal. "Get some rest, all of you. The medical officer wants to keep you under observation for the next 24 hours. We're heading back to Adak at full speed. Once we're in port, you'll be flown to Anchorage for formal debriefing." We left his cabin, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. Instead, I made my way back to the deck, to the rail where I'd stood before, looking out at the now darkening water. Night was falling, and with it came the realization that somewhere beneath these waves, the Megalodon was swimming, adapting to its new freedom, learning about this modern world it had awakened into. Chun joined me at the rail. "You think it'll follow us? Back to Adak?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I think we're going to see it again. Something that's smart, that aware. It won't just swim away and forget about us." "The old man," Chun said suddenly. "Samuel. When we get back, we should talk to him. He knew something about that place, about what was down there. Maybe his people have stories, traditions, knowledge that could help us understand what we're dealing with." It was a good idea. The Aleut people had lived in these waters for thousands of years. If anyone had legends or warnings about creatures in the deep, it would be them. The Petrel's engines rumbled beneath our feet, pushing the ship toward home at maximum speed. Behind us, the dive site receded into the distance, marked by the anchor buoys we'd left to identify the location. Those buoys bobbed innocently on the surface, giving no hint of the horror that lurked in the depths below. As darkness fell completely, I thought I saw something in the water, a massive shadow keeping pace with our ship, maintaining a distance of maybe 100 yards. But every time I tried to focus on it, it seemed to disappear, leaving me uncertain whether I'd seen anything at all or if my traumatized mind was playing tricks on me. Beside me, Chun had seen it too. I could tell by the way his hand gripped the rail, his knuckles white with tension. Neither of us said anything. What was there to say? The creature was following us, learning about our vessels, our technology, our vulnerabilities. And there was nothing we could do but watch and wait and wonder what would happen when it finally decided we were worth hunting again. Pacific Fleet Command made their decision within 12 hours. They would attempt the acoustic herding operation, but with a contingency plan. 3 attack submarines would maintain position at the edge of the operational area, armed and ready to engage if the herding failed. It was a compromise between Samuel's wisdom and military pragmatism, and I suspected it would satisfy no one. But the real shock came when Commander Hayes called the 4 of us, Ray, Chen, Jimmy, and me, into his office the next morning. "Command wants you on the operation," he said without preamble. "Not as diverse as observers. You've had more direct contact with this creature than anyone alive. They want your expertise on site." "No," Jimmy said immediately. "No way. I'm not going back out there. I can't." I didn't blame him. The nightmares had started for all of us. Visions of Doc Williams being torn apart, of Russo's final scream, of those massive jaws opening in the darkness. Jimmy had barely slept since we'd returned, and when he did, he woke screaming. "It's voluntary," Hayes said, though his tone suggested it wasn't really. "But Command believes your presence might actually help. If Samuel's right about the creature bonding to its first encounters, having you on site could draw it into the acoustic corridor more effectively." "You want us as bait," Chun said flatly. "I want you as experts who happen to be uniquely qualified to attract the target's attention if necessary," Hayes corrected. "There's a difference." "Not from where I'm sitting," Jimmy muttered. Ray had been silent, but now he spoke. "If we don't do this and the military option fails, more people die. More ships go down. Maybe the creature makes it to commercial shipping lanes or even coastal areas. We know what it's capable of. We've seen what it can do. If our presence gives this operation a better chance of success." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. I thought about Samuel's words, about the creature holding grudges, remembering faces, marking prey. If we didn't face it now, on our terms, would it come for us later? Would it hunt us specifically, putting everyone around us at risk? "I'm in," I said. The words felt heavy coming out of my mouth. Final. Chun nodded slowly. "Me too. For Doc and Russo. They deserve to have this thing dealt with properly, not just blown apart by torpedoes." All eyes turned to Jimmy. The youngest of our group looked terrified, his hands shaking as he gripped the edge of the conference table. "I can't," he whispered. "I see it every time I close my eyes. I hear Russo screaming. I can't go back there." "Then don't," Ray said gently. "No one's forcing you, Jimmy. Stay here. Help with the coordination from the base. That's just as important." But Jimmy was shaking his head, tears streaming down his face. "Doc would have gone. Russo would have gone. They'd want us to finish this." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself. "I'm terrified, but I'm going. Because someone has to, and it might as well be us." 72 hours later, we were aboard the USS Dallas, a research vessel equipped with experimental acoustic arrays designed to emit specific frequencies across a wide area. The ship was surrounded by a flotilla of support vessels, Coast Guard cutters, Navy destroyers, and somewhere beneath the surface, those 3 attack submarines waiting for the order to strike. The plan was elegant in theory. Create an acoustic corridor using overlapping sound fields that would be uncomfortable but not harmful to the Megalodon. The corridor would lead from the creature's current territory, which our tracking had identified as the area around the original dive site, toward the Aleutian Trench, one of the deepest parts of the Pacific Ocean. Once there, the cold and pressure would encourage the creature to enter a dormant state. In practice, it was madness. Samuel was aboard the Dallas as a consultant, along with Dr. Patricia Keene, a marine biologist specializing in shark behavior, and a team of Navy sonar technicians. The bridge was crowded with monitors showing sonar returns, thermal imaging, and real-time acoustic modeling. "Target contact," one of the technicians called out. "Bearing 270, range 3,000 yards, depth 250 feet. On the sonar display, a massive return appeared, far larger than any normal sea creature, moving with purposeful direction. The Megalodon was there, and it knew we were here. "Is it approaching?" Dr. Keene asked, leaning over the display. "Negative. Holding position, circling. Wait." The technician frowned. "It's not just circling. It's creating a pattern. Almost like it's searching," I finished. "Looking for something specific. Looking for us." "Initiate acoustic corridor, Phase 1. The operation commander ordered. Throughout the ship, I felt more than heard the deep thrumming as the acoustic arrays activated. The sound was below normal hearing range, but it vibrated through the deck, through the bulkheads, into our bones. On the sonar display, the sound field appeared as a colored overlay, a pathway of uncomfortable frequencies designed to push the Megalodon away from shipping lanes and toward the trench. The creature's reaction was immediate. The sonar return showed it breaking its circular pattern, moving away from the acoustic field but not toward the trench. Instead, it dove deeper, descending to 400 feet, then 500, disappearing below the effective range of our sonar. "We've lost contact," the technician reported. "Maintain the corridor," the commander ordered. "It'll have to surface eventually. When it does, the acoustic field will guide it." But I had a bad feeling. The way the creature had responded, not panicking, not fleeing blindly, but deliberately diving below our detection range, spoke of intelligence. It was analyzing the threat, thinking through its options. Samuel appeared at my shoulder. "It's not running," he said quietly. "It's repositioning." "For what?" Before Samuel could answer, the ship shuddered. Not violently, but enough to make everyone on the bridge grab for support. Alarms started blaring. "Collision! We've hit something!" someone shouted. But we hadn't hit anything. Something had hit us. The sonar operator was frantically adjusting his equipment. "Contact! Jesus Christ! It's right underneath us. Depth 100 feet and rising fast." The Megalodon had circled below our detection range and come up directly beneath the Dallas, ramming the hull with calculated precision. Not hard enough to breach it, but hard enough to demonstrate capability to send a message. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm not running from your sounds and your lights. I'm here. What are you going to do about it?" "All vessels, this is Dallas Actual," the commander was saying into the radio. "Be advised, target is aggressive and engaging. Request immediate support from Hunter-Killer Group." On the sonar display, the Megalodon had descended again, but this time we were tracking it. The creature was circling the Dallas at a distance of 500 yards, maintaining a depth of 300 feet. Not attacking, not fleeing. Waiting. "It's evaluating us," Dr. Keene said, her scientific curiosity warring with obvious fear, determining if we're a threat, a competitor, or prey. "We need to draw it into the corridor," the commander said. "Increase acoustic intensity in sectors 2 through 5. Force it toward the western channel." The thrumming intensified, and I saw crew members wincing, some covering their ears even though the sound was supposedly below our hearing range. The acoustic field concentrated, forming a wall of uncomfortable frequency that should have driven the Megalodon away. Instead, the creature swam directly into it. On sonar, we watched as the massive return navigated through the most intense part of the acoustic field without hesitation. Not fleeing from discomfort, but accepting it as the price of reaching its objective. And its objective was becoming clear: this ship. "It's adapting," Chun said, his voice tight with realization. "Just like it adapted to light, to movement, to our diving equipment. It's learning to tolerate the acoustic field." "That's not possible," Dr. Keene said. "Sharks have incredibly sensitive hearing. These frequencies should be—" The Dallas shuddered again, harder this time. Metal groaned. Somewhere below deck, something crashed. "Direct impact, starboard side, amidships." A damage control report came through. "No breach, but we've got buckled plates. Another hit like that and we'll have flooding." The commander grabbed the radio. "Hunter-killer group, this is Dallas Actual. Target is engaging and acoustic deterrent is ineffective. You are weapons-free. Repeat, you are weapons-free." "Belay that order," Samuel shouted, shocking everyone on the bridge. "You attack it now, in these shallow waters with all these ships around, and it will tear through this entire flotilla." "I'm not going to let it sink my ship," the commander shouted back. "Then do what I said in the first place, don't fight it. Redirect it." Samuel turned to Ray. "Your team. The creature knows you, recognizes you. You need to be visible to it, need to get its attention focused on something other than destruction." "What are you suggesting?" Ray asked, though I could see in his eyes that he already knew. "Someone needs to go into the water," Samuel said. "Not deep, just enough for the creature to see you, to identify you as the familiar presence from its awakening. Then we use that focus, that recognition, to guide it toward the trench." "You want us to swim with that thing?" Jimmy asked, his voice breaking. "After what it did to Doc and Russo?" "I want you to lead it," Samuel corrected. "The Dallas moves toward the trench, maintaining maximum speed. One of you in the water, in a shark cage if it makes you feel better, visible, and identifiable. The creature follows what it recognizes. We guide it away from the shipping lanes into deeper water, and once we're far enough from other vessels, then the submarines can engage if necessary." It was insane. It was suicidal. It was also the only plan that made any sense. "I'll do it," I said before anyone else could volunteer. Ray immediately shook his head. "Webb, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. I was there when it woke up. I looked directly into its eye. If it recognizes anyone, it's me." I turned to the commander. "Do we have a shark cage on board?" "We do," he said slowly. "We brought one in case we needed to deploy underwater cameras. But Lieutenant, this creature could tear through steel like tissue paper." "I know, but it won't. Not immediately. It'll want to investigate first, examine me, understand what I am. That curiosity buys us time. Time to get it moving in the right direction." Samuel placed a hand on my shoulder. "The amulet. You still have it." I pulled the carved bone piece from my pocket. In the fluorescent lights of the bridge, the symbols seemed to glow faintly, though I knew that had to be my imagination. "Keep it with you," Samuel said. "My grandfather said it doesn't protect you from Aklat. It protects your mind from what facing Aklat does to you. Keeps you sane when everything in your brain is screaming to flee." 20 minutes later, I was being lowered into the water in a steel shark cage. The cage was 10 feet on each side, reinforced bars designed to withstand attacks from normal sharks. Against a megalodon, it might as well have been made of paper. But it gave the illusion of safety, and sometimes illusions are all you have. The water was dark despite it being midday. Cloud cover blocked most of the sunlight, and beneath the surface, visibility was maybe 30 feet. I had a full face mask with communication equipment, a waterproof light strobe, and the bone amulet tied around my wrist. "Webb, you read me?" Ray's voice came through the comm copy. "I'm in position. Sonar shows target at your depth, 200 yards and closing. We're starting forward motion now. Speed 5 knots. Through the bars of the cage, I could see the hull of the Dallas beginning to move, pulling me slowly through the water. The other ships were maintaining their positions, creating a corridor for us to travel through. In the distance, I knew the submarines were pacing us, ready to strike if this plan failed. I tried to control my breathing, tried to keep my heart rate steady. Fear was natural, expected, but panic would get me killed. I focused on the amulet on my wrist, on the ancient symbols carved into bone by people who had faced this terror before and survived. Then I saw it. A shadow in the murky water, massive and dark, moving with terrible grace. The Megalodon approached slowly, cautiously, its prehistoric brain processing this strange object in its territory. The cage, the human inside, the familiar scent and bioelectric signature. The creature came closer, and I could see details now. The scarred skin, the massive gills flexing with each breath, the pectoral fins that spanned wider than my arms could reach, and the eye, that huge, dark, intelligent eye that fixed on me with unmistakable recognition. "Yes," that I said. "I remember you. You were there when I woke. You were the first face I saw in this strange new world." The Megalodon circled the cage once, twice, maintaining a distance of about 20 feet. Testing, evaluating, deciding. "It's working," I whispered into the comm. "It recognizes me. It's following. Maintain position," the commander's voice responded. "We're increasing speed to 8 knots. Hunter-killer group is matching our course." The Dallas pulled me faster through the water, and the Megalodon followed. Not aggressively, not attacking, just following with that terrible patience. We traveled like that for what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes. The ship pulling me in my cage, the prehistoric monster following, learning, watching. We were 15 miles from the original dive site when the Megalodon suddenly changed behavior. It accelerated, closing the distance between us rapidly. I grabbed the bars of the cage, my knuckles white with tension, as the massive head came within 5 feet of me. The jaws opened slightly, revealing rows of serrated teeth. This close, I could see the individual denticles on its skin, the pale scars from ancient battles, the sheer impossible size of the creature. One bite could cut me in half. One shake of that massive head could tear the cage apart. But it didn't bite. It didn't attack. Instead, it did something I'll never forget. It rolled slightly to one side, bringing its eye level with mine, and just looked at me. Not with hunger, not with aggression, but with what I can only describe as curiosity. As if it were trying to understand what I was, why I was here, what connection we shared. For a moment, just a heartbeat, I felt something pass between us. Not communication exactly, but recognition of a sort. Two creatures far from home, trapped in circumstances neither of us had chosen, trying to survive in a world that had become strange and dangerous. Then the moment passed. The Megalodon's eye darkened, and I saw the predator return. The creature accelerated again, this time swimming past the cage toward the Dallas itself. "It's breaking off," I shouted into the comm. "It's going for the ship. All stop," the commander ordered. "Webb, we're retrieving you now." The winch started pulling me up, but I watched as the Megalodon reached the Dallas. The creature didn't ram it this time. Instead, it did something far more terrifying. It began systematically testing the hull, bumping it with its snout at different points, feeling for weaknesses, thinking, planning. "Hunter-killer group, you are cleared hot," the commander said. "Target is aggressive and engaged. Take the shot." I broke the surface just as the first torpedo launched. Crew members grabbed the cage, hauling it onto the deck, pulling me out. I stood at the rail, dripping and shaking, watching the water where the Megalodon had been. The torpedo struck with a massive explosion, sending a column of water 50 feet into the air. Then a second torpedo hit and a third. The sea churned with the force of the detonations, and for a moment, everyone stood frozen, waiting to see if it had worked. Then the sonar operator's voice crackled over the speakers. Multiple contacts. It's not dead. It's Christ. It's moving toward Dallas at 30 knots. The Megalodon erupted from the water beside the ship, its massive body breaching in rage and pain. Blood poured from wounds on its flank, but the torpedoes hadn't killed it. They'd only made it angry. It crashed back into the sea, and I saw its tail rise up, saw it slam against the Dallas's hull with enough force to make the entire ship list to one side. Alarms blared, metal screeched, and somewhere beneath us, the wounded, enraged Megalodon was circling back for another attack. The Dallas was taking on water. Damage control teams rushed below deck, but I could hear it. The groaning of stressed metal, the shouts of sailors fighting to seal the breach. The Megalodon's tail strike had buckled plates along the waterline, and the ocean was pouring in. All personnel, prepare for emergency evacuation. The commander's voice boomed over the speakers. Coast Guard vessels, move in for rescue operations. But evacuating meant getting into the water. Getting into the water meant being at the Megalodon's mercy. It's coming back, the sonar operator shouted. Target bearing 180, depth 50 feet, speed 20 knots and increasing. Through the churning water, I could see the massive dorsal fin cutting toward us like a blade. The creature was wounded, bleeding from the torpedo strikes, but far from defeated. If anything, the injuries had transformed it from a calculating predator into something more primal, a force of pure rage and pain. Samuel stood beside me at the rail, his weathered face grave. It won't stop now, not until it's destroyed the thing that hurt it. That's the Dallas. That's us. Then we have to give it something else to focus on, I said, an idea forming even as terror threatened to overwhelm my rational mind. I grabbed Ray's arm. The acoustic arrays. Can we reverse them? Instead of pushing the creature away, pull it toward something. Ray's eyes widened with understanding. Create a target it wants more than the ship. But what? The submarines, Chun interrupted, catching on. They fired the torpedoes. They're the ones that hurt it. If we can get the Megalodon to associate the acoustic signature with the submarines instead of us. Dr. Keene was already working on her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. The creature's hunting behavior, it's tracking bioelectric signatures, vibrations, and now acoustic patterns. If we can modulate the arrays to mimic submarine engine signatures while simultaneously dampening our own acoustic profile, we might redirect its aggression. How long? The commander demanded, clutching the rail as the ship listed further. 2 minutes to reprogram. Maybe less. We don't have 2 minutes, someone shouted. The Megalodon was 100 yards away now, its massive body creating a wake that pushed smaller waves toward us. I could see its eye again, that dark, intelligent eye now clouded with pain and fury. Blood trailed behind it in the water, a crimson banner marking its path of vengeance. 50 yards. Dr. Keene, the commander barked. Almost there. Got it. Engaging modified acoustic pattern now. The deep thrumming changed, shifted to a different frequency. Through the deck, I could feel it resonating differently, almost like a pulse, mimicking the rhythmic sound of submarine propulsion systems. The Megalodon was 20 yards away when it suddenly veered. Not away from us, toward the west, where the 3 attack submarines were maintaining their position. The creature had new prey, something that its primitive brain associated with pain, with threat, with the need to destroy. Hunter-killer group, you have an incoming hostile, the commander shouted into the radio. Target is wounded and aggressive, approaching your position at high speed. We see it on sonar, Dallas. We're going evasive and preparing to re-engage. But we all knew, that the submarines were now the hunted. The Megalodon would pursue them into the deep water, away from the shipping lanes, away from the Dallas. Whether it would catch them or whether they could destroy it remained to be seen. But we had bought ourselves time, bought ourselves a chance to survive. "All hands abandon ship," the commander ordered. "This is not a drill. Coast Guard vessels alongside. Commence rescue operations." The next 30 minutes were chaos. Crew members scrambling into life rafts, Coast Guard cutters pulling alongside to take on personnel, damage control teams making their last desperate efforts to save the Dallas even as she listed heavily to starboard. I helped where I could, pulling sailors over rails, securing lines, my body moving on autopilot while my mind remained fixed on the water. Somewhere out there, the battle continued. Through the radio chatter, we heard fragments. Submarines reporting contact, torpedo launches, sonar tracking showing the Megalodon diving to depths that should have crushed it, emerging from below to attack. The creature was fighting for its life, and it was fighting with the accumulated cunning of millions of years of evolution. By the time the Dallas finally settled lower in the water, stabilized but badly damaged, most of the crew had been evacuated to the Coast Guard vessels. Our team, Ray, Chan, Jimmy, and I, stood on the deck of the USCGC Stratton, watching as the sun began to set over the scene of devastation. "Do you think they got it?" Jimmy asked quietly. "The submarines?" Ray shook his head. "We would have heard. They would have confirmed the kill." He was right. The radio had gone silent on the submarine channels minutes ago. Either they were maintaining radio silence for tactical reasons or target contact lost. A voice finally crackled over the Stratton speakers. "Last known position was diving beyond crush depth for our tracking equipment. We're showing 900 feet and descending. No debris field, no blood trail we can detect. The creature has either died from its wounds or successfully evaded. 900 feet and descending. Into the darkness, into the cold, into the deep places where submarines couldn't follow and humans couldn't survive. The Megalodon was going home, returning to the abyss that had spawned it millions of years ago. Or was it? Was it dying, bleeding out in the darkness, finally succumbing to wounds that would have killed any normal creature instantly? Or was it healing, its prehistoric biology adapting, learning, preparing for the next encounter? We'd never know for certain. 3 weeks later, I stood in Samuel's small house near the Aleut community, sharing tea while snow fell softly outside. The old fisherman moved slowly, his injuries from a lifetime of hard work evident, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "The Navy declared it dead," I said. "Official report states that the creature was destroyed by combined torpedo strikes and subsequently sank beyond recoverable depth." "And do you believe that?" Samuel asked. I was quiet for a long time, turning the warm cup in my hands. "No, I think it's out there. Wounded, maybe. Cautious, definitely. But alive. Learning from what happened. Adapting, becoming even more dangerous." Samuel nodded slowly. "My grandfather used to say that Aklat cannot be killed, only contained. And even containment is temporary. The old things, the ancient things, they persist. They endure. They wait. The warming waters won't help," I said. "More ice melting, more prehistoric creatures potentially thawing out. What happened with the Megalodon, it could happen again. Different creature, different place, but the same terrible outcome." "Perhaps that's the lesson," Samuel said, refilling our cups. "Not that we should hunt these creatures or study them or try to control them, but that we should respect the boundaries between our world and theirs. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again." The Navy had officially disbanded our diving team. Jimmy had taken a medical discharge, the psychological trauma too severe for him to continue active duty. Chun had been reassigned to a research facility in California, far from the ocean. Ray had been given a desk job at Naval Headquarters in Norfolk. And me? I'd been offered early retirement with full benefits and a non-disclosure agreement that carried criminal penalties if violated. I signed it. What choice did I have? Who would believe our story anyway, beyond the sanitized version in the official reports? But some nights, I'd wake from dreams of dark water and massive jaws, of that intelligent eye staring into mine, of the moment when I'd felt a connection to something ancient and terrible. On those nights, I'd pull out the bone amulet Samuel had given me, trace the carved symbols with my fingers, and wonder if the Megalodon remembered me the way I remembered it. Wonder if it was hunting in the deep Pacific, testing its strength against whales and submarines. Wonder if it was breeding, if there were others like it frozen in glacial ice around the world, waiting to wake. Wonder if someday it would come back for me. The news reports had been sporadic but troubling. A Japanese research vessel reporting a massive sonar contact near the Aleutian Trench. A Russian submarine claiming to have been bumped by something large at depth. Commercial fishermen finding whales with massive bite marks. Serrated tooth patterns that didn't match any known species. The Navy investigated each report, found mundane explanations, classified the rest. But I knew, we all knew, the Megalodon was out there, and it wasn't the only thing waking from the ice. I stood on the shore near Adak one final time before my retirement became official, watching waves crash against the rocks. The water was dark and cold, hiding its secrets beneath a surface that looked deceptively calm. How many prehistoric creatures lurked in those depths? How many monsters from Earth's ancient past were slowly stirring from their frozen prisons? Behind me, I heard footsteps. Ray approached, his hands in his pockets, his expression thoughtful. "Came to say goodbye?" I asked. "Came to ask if you think it's over," he said. I thought about Doc Williams and Anthony Russo, about the terror in Jimmy's eyes, about Chen's desperate attempts to rationalize the irrational. I thought about the Megalodon's eye looking into mine, about the moment of recognition between predator and prey. "No," I said finally, "I don't think it's over. I think it's just beginning." Ray nodded slowly, unsurprised by my answer. "Command is establishing new protocols. No more deep diving near glacial formations. No more disturbing ancient ice. Better sonar monitoring. But it's reactive, not proactive. We're treating the symptom, not the disease." "The disease being human curiosity," I said. "Our need to explore, to discover, to understand everything. We can't help ourselves." "Maybe that's not a disease," Ray suggested. "Maybe that's just what humans are. And maybe things like the Megalodon, they're nature's way of reminding us that we're not the apex predator we think we are." He was right. For millions of years, humans had climbed to the top of the food chain through intelligence and technology. But the Megalodon represented something older, something more fundamental, pure predatory excellence honed by eons of evolution. In the water, in its domain, we were just prey. "What will you do?" Ray asked. "After retirement?" "Stay far from the ocean," I said, attempting a joke that neither of us found funny. "Maybe move to Kansas, somewhere landlocked." But we both knew I wouldn't. The ocean was in my blood now, along with the memory of what lurked in its darkest depths. I'd spend the rest of my life watching the water, waiting for signs, wondering when the creatures from the past would fully reclaim their world. As if in response to my thoughts, something broke the surface about 100 yards offshore. Just for a moment, just a glimpse of something massive and dark before it submerged again. Probably a whale, probably nothing. But Ray and I both tensed, both took an instinctive step back from the water's edge. Probably nothing. Probably. Do you think the creature was truly defeated? Or is it still out there, waiting in the deep? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more terrifying true stories from the depths. The world continued turning. Ships sailed the Pacific. Divers explored underwater territories. Scientists studied the ocean's mysteries. And somewhere in the cold darkness of the Aleutian Trench, something ancient watched and waited and remembered. The age of humans may have lasted tens of thousands of years, but the age of megalodons lasted millions. And in the contest between modern arrogance and prehistoric patience, I knew which one I'd bet on for survival. I touched the bone amulet one last time, then turned away from the shore. Behind me, the ocean whispered its secrets to the wind. Secrets about things that sleep in ice, about boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, about the price of disturbing forces we don't understand. Samuel was right. Some doors can never truly be closed once opened. We had awakened the Megalodon, had released it from its frozen prison, and now we had to live with the consequences of that choice. The old fisherman's final words to me echoed in my mind. The ancient things, they persist. They endure. They wait. And they never, ever forget. I carried those words with me as I left Alaska behind. Carried them along with the memories of dark water and massive jaws. Of two friends lost to a creature that shouldn't exist. Of the moment when I looked into a predator's eye and saw intelligence staring back. Somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, in waters too deep for sunlight to penetrate, the Megalodon was swimming, learning, adapting, surviving, and remembering, always remembering,